You ever get that feeling that your team is just going through the motions? Or maybe even worse, you know they're hiding mistakes. Now, your first instinct is probably to call it a performance problem, right? But what if I told you the secret to fixing it isn't about finding more so-called A players? What if it's about a biological switch that you as a leader have the power to flip? Let's get into the real reason teams fail and the surprising science behind what it means to truly lead. Okay, so let's start with a real head-scratcher. How is it possible for the exact same person, same skills, same personality, same everything, to be an absolute superstar at one job and then be completely checked out, just a C player, at another? The answer has almost nothing to do with them and everything to do with their brain chemistry. And honestly, once you get this, it'll change how you see leadership forever. To really unpack this, we gotta talk about a real-world story. It's about a barista named Noah, and his experience just illustrates this whole mystery perfectly. So at his job at the Four Seasons Hotel, Noah was a total rock star. He was funny, he was charming with the customers, and when one of them asked him if he liked his job, he didn't just say yes. He lit up and said, "I love my job." But see, Noah also had a second job over at Caesar's Palace, and there, it was like a totally different person. He was a ghost, he just kept his head down, did the bare minimum, and was basically just there to collect a paycheck. Same guy, completely different outcomes. So what gives? What was the variable here? It wasn't Noah, he was the constant. The only thing that changed between those two jobs was the environment. It was the leadership. And that was what decided whether the customers got an A player or a C player. And look, this story about Noah, it's not just some anecdote about a barista. It's actually a diagnosis for so many of our own teams. It shows us that what we often call performance issues, they're not really about skill or motivation or any of that. They're about something much more fundamental, a lack of psychological safety. It's a direct biological response to the environment they're in. It just means they don't feel safe enough to be vulnerable, not safe enough to admit they need help, or to just put their hand up and say, "You know what, I made a mistake." And this all comes down to a really powerful concept called the circle of safety. Think about it, for 50,000 years, we've been biologically hardwired to survive in tribes. And when we feel safe, when we feel protected by the leaders of our tribe, we naturally trust each other and we cooperate. But the moment that feeling of safety is gone, our deep-seated survival instincts kick in, and we start wasting all our time and energy protecting ourselves from each other. And when that circle of safety is broken, man, the results are always the same. You get cynicism, you get paranoia, everyone starts looking out for themselves. People hide their mistakes because they're terrified of being punished. They fake their progress because they're scared of being on the next layoff list. And you have to remember, these aren't character flaws. These are just the symptoms of a failed leadership environment. So, why does this happen on a biological level? Well, the answer is literally inside all of us, right now. Our behavior at work is driven by this little chemical factory in our own bodies. Let's break down how it works. Okay, so our actions are mostly governed by four main chemicals, and you can pretty much put them into two camps. First, you've got the selfish chemicals, like dopamine. That's that little satisfying hit you get when you achieve a goal or cross something off your to-do list. We need it for drive, but it's short-term and super addictive. And on the other side, you've got the selfless chemicals, serotonin and oxytocin. These aren't about instant gratification. Nope, these are the social glue. They build the long-term feelings of trust and pride and belonging. All right, let's look at the whole lineup. Endorphins are pretty simple. They just mask physical pain. Dopamine, that's the one that rewards our progress when we hit a target. But here's the trap. So many companies become dopamine-addicted environments, right? Just constantly chasing the next number, the next short-term hit. But real leadership, it cultivates the other two. Serotonin, that's the feeling of pride you get from public recognition, and oxytocin, which might be the most important one of all. That's the feeling of deep trust and connection. And you don't get that from an email. You get it from genuine human generosity and care. So all of this biology, all this science of trust, it leads us directly to a really powerful leadership philosophy. It's the idea of sacrificial leadership. You know, the phrase "leaders eat last" actually comes from a tradition in the Marine Corps, where the officers will only eat after all of their troops have been fed. It's just the perfect metaphor for this whole idea. True leadership means you are willing to sacrifice your own interests, your time, your energy, even the good parking spot, to make sure the people inside your circle of safety feel supported enough to do their absolute best work. And this leads to a really simple but profound shift in what a leader is actually responsible for. See, as a leader, you are not directly responsible for the results. You are responsible for the people, who are then responsible for the results. When you get that environment right, the results just kind of take care of themselves. Leadership is not a rank, it is a choice to look after the person to your left and the person to your right. I mean, that really says it all, doesn't it? It's a behavior, it's a choice, it's not a position on some org chart. Okay, so this all makes sense. It sounds great in theory, but the big question is, how do you actually do this? How do you start building that circle of safety? Let's get into a real, practical action plan. First things first, it takes a massive mindset shift. See, way too many organizations are playing what's called a finite game. The goal is just to win, to beat the competition. There's a finish line. But great businesses and great leaders, they play an infinite game. The goal isn't to win. The goal is just to keep playing, to keep getting better. In an infinite game, your only real competitor is who you were yesterday. And that mindset, it naturally creates collaboration instead of rivalry. And that collaboration is the foundation of the circle of safety. Now, let's talk actions. Building trust is exactly like going to the gym. You can't just go for 9 hours on a Monday and expect to be in shape, right? It's all about the small, consistent, daily efforts. Things like being honest about where things are, even when the news isn't great, or practicing what's called the reciprocity of gratitude, which just means don't just say thanks, tell someone specifically what they did that you're grateful for. The key is to just give your time and energy freely without keeping a running tally. These are the little habits that build unbreakable bonds. Because at the end of the day, real leadership isn't a workshop you go to or a book you read once. It's a lifestyle. It's the consistent, moment-by-moment choice to put the safety and well-being of your team above your own personal gain. And that brings us to the end of this explainer, but really, it's just the beginning of your work. So I want to leave you with a direct challenge. Just look at your team, think about your circle of safety, and ask yourself this. What is the one concrete thing you will do this week to make your people feel safer? Safer to tell the truth, safer to admit they made a mistake, or safer to ask for help? Because that single action, that's where real leadership begins. You ever